And welcome to Rob Schmidt Tonight. America is back. The adults are back in charge. There's been several spins on Biden's 2020 election win over Trump, and today we got to see what an adult actually looks like as Biden addressed a room full of other adults. As we've learned over the last several months, being an adult is saying all the right things while essentially getting nothing done. As I watched today's UN speech, I knew it was going to be our big topic tonight, but I didn't expect the president to name off so many pieces of horrible foreign policy, liberal foreign policy, all at once. It made our job very easy today. Hands down the best soundbite of the week right here. Here's the president bragging about America's return to futility.
We're back at the table in international forums, especially the United Nations, to focus attention and to spur global action on shared challenges. We are re-engaged at the World Health Organization and working in close partnership with COVAX to deliver life-saving vaccines around the world. We rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement, and we're running to retake a seat in the Human Rights Council next year at the UN.
The United Nations, the Paris Climate Accord, the Human Rights Council, the World Health Organization, all in one. It's like a greatest hits of the most useless organizations and agreements that the world has ever known. These are the priorities when the adults are back in charge, you see. Where to begin on this? The United Nations, of course, has long been a joke, the absolute pinnacle of globalism, a hyper-liberal institution with a clear disdain for Israel and a globalist agenda centered around the distribution of American wealth all over the world. The UN hates you, the hardworking American living in a safe community, but the UN needs your money. The UN headquarters in Midtown Manhattan has become an embarrassment to New York City. Trump wanted to throw them out of Manhattan. It would have been epic if he had done so. A pillar to government bureaucracy and fecklessness, a hollow shell of what was intended when it was founded after World War II. The UN is so useless it allows countries committing human rights abuses to weigh in on human rights on its Human Rights Council, a council we withdrew from under Trump, with former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley leading that charge. Here's Haley after pulling out 3 years ago.
The world's most inhumane regimes continue to escape scrutiny, and the Council continues politicizing and scapegoating of countries with positive human rights records in an attempt to distract from the abusers in their ranks.
She says the obvious, the liberals all gasped. Oh, we're out of the Human Rights Council? How could we? But don't worry, the adults are now back in the room. So we're going to rejoin China on the Human Rights Council as they enslave Muslims in Xinjiang province. Today, Haley slammed Biden's decision to rejoin the council on Twitter, also calling out the president's ability to casually ignore so many atrocities and not even mention China by name in the speech. I hope you're excited to see the Taliban join in on some of this fun, because the Taliban's foreign minister has asked to address world leaders at the United Nations next Monday. Now, this is not going to happen, and it's not going to happen this year, but there is always next year, and the Taliban could seriously end up being on UN commissions for women's rights if they were to rejoin. And you kind of get the feeling that they will, because the UN kind of sees the world their way. In a lot of ways. They see the world through the Palestinians' eyes, through the Taliban's eyes. That's how they see the world. They don't like a lot of the things that America stands for in this world. And how hilarious would it be to see Taliban members walking around New York City every September? Imagine that. And then there's the World Health Organization. Of course, China's coronavirus accomplice. The adults, of course, are sending your money to the WHO again, as expected. And then finally, the Paris Climate Accord. Biden spent a lot of his speech warning about climate change. So we must re-engage in a plan that, of course, cripples the United States and gives China the biggest leg up advantage it's ever had over this country, incentivizing the Chinese to pollute more while crippling our ability to manufacture.
And the scientists and experts are telling us that we're fast approaching a point of no return in a literal sense. To keep within our reach the vital goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Yes, and the burden for saving the world will fall on the only countries who right now are reducing their emissions. We will suffer the entire burden of this, while the world's biggest polluters will burn away for another 9 years at least. That's if they actually re-enter this plan, which China has not even agreed to do so yet. So if we can manage to get them back in, it's still a terrible plan, and we can't even figure out how to do that. Yes, of course, the adults have got this all figured out. Aren't you so proud? Today, Biden avoided the blame on multiple crises he's created, both domestically and internationally, even going so far as to brag about Afghanistan.
I stand here today for the first time in 20 years with the United States not at war. We've turned the page.
Fair point. We got out of Afghanistan. It's probably a good thing. It might be a little too soon, though, to try and score points off of the disaster that ensued by the way that they got us out of Afghanistan. Just because they did the right thing doesn't mean that they did it with any kind of common sense. They did not. Also today, just after his speech, Democrats creating a new problem for the president, the party blocking $1 billion for Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system in their new spending and debt ceiling bill, which, by the way, just passed in the House. Yes, that's right. Of all the money we want to send all over the world, including to Pakistan and many other places, the progressives in the Democrat Party who hate Israel, the Squad members and others like them, can't stand that this country helps Israel protect innocent life from a barrage of rocket attacks from Gaza, which of course frequently happen. Even as we do send hundreds of millions of dollars to the Palestinians who are firing those rockets, apparently we can't be sending money to the people trying to protect women and children from where those rockets land. Welcome to the state of Democrat foreign policy in this country. It's idiocy. The president also in big trouble with the French right now, one of our greatest allies, after helping to equip Australia with nuclear-powered submarines, upending a French defense contract that was worth about $66 billion to sell diesel-powered submarines to Australia. Macron's had it with them. France has pulled their ambassador over that move. The president also too scared to call out China directly today, as Nikki Haley said, but did vaguely mention our most serious threat, essentially telling the bad actors of the world like China to please be nicer, a message I'm sure landed very hard. And in true liberal fashion at the UN always comes a major push for its true mission, globalization.
We will strive to ensure that basic labor rights, environmental safeguards, and intellectual property are protected, and that the benefits of globalization are shared broadly throughout all our societies.
The benefits of globalization. Well, make sure you know this. There are no benefits for this country, or really any first world country. You should know that. The spreading of American wealth worldwide is a benefit of globalization. The watering down of American quality of life is another benefit, something we're watching happen in real time. Look at your southern border. That's globalization in full effect. How different all of this was to watch today, if you did watch it, from the first address to the UN of our last president.
The true question for the United Nations today, for people all over the world who hope for better lives for themselves and their children, is a basic one. Are we still patriots? As President of the United States, I will always put America first. Just like you, as the leaders of your countries, will always and should always put your countries first.
California Congressman Devin Nunes joins us now to talk about all this. Sir, thanks for coming on. Good to have you again.
Always a pleasure, Rob. Thanks
Just
for
want to
having me.
just want to get your initial response to the Biden UN speech today. What did you make of that speech?
Look, I think it just shows continued weakness. I think Victor Davis Hanson said it best when it looks like the Biden foreign policy is speak loudly but carry a twig. And I think that was just more of it today. This whole thing with the adults are in charge, the cool kids are in charge.
Right.
They rejoined the Paris Climate Accords. It's really rather embarrassing.
And yeah, let's talk about that. Rejoining some of these useless agreements and institutions. Paris Climate Accord, we know that is feckless at best. UN Human Rights Council, we picked that apart as well. World Health Organization.
World Health Organization.
It's just so dumb. And I think we've looked at all of these things and we can all see how feckless all of this is. What does that do to our country to have him stand up there and proudly announce that we're going back to these just worthless organizations and institutions?
Well, and I would even take it a step farther than that. It's not just about that they're rejoining all of these organizations at a time when the World Health Organization, remember, we withdrew because of the whole debacle that they wouldn't do a real investigation during the Trump administration on COVID-19. But remember, he didn't mention China or Russia in the speech.
Yeah.
So that's why I say he's carrying a twig. He's surrendering, joining all what he calls the cool kids, says the adults are in charge. Meanwhile, we have a debacle in Afghanistan where we lose 13 of our military members, not to mention countless other Americans that are probably being murdered right now. They could be held hostage. And at the same time, he's just withdrawing from really the world stage, which ironically is what they accused Trump of doing.
Right.
It's just really alarming, I think.
It is. That's a very interesting point, actually. And also today we learned something that I think is terrible politics for their side. Democrats pulling $1 billion in funding for Israel's Iron Dome. And also, I mean, we've been sending money to the Palestinians. We send money to Pakistan. And yet we're pulling money from Israel. This is money that they use to defend themselves, to defend their own people, to defend women and children from rocket attacks coming in from the Gaza Strip. How do you justify pulling that money?
So remember, just a few months ago, Israel was under attack. We have long supplied Israel with that technology, helped build the technology, and help retool the technology once it's used up. So Israel needs this money. They've been our long-standing ally. And what you had is you had some of the Democrats who demanded that that get put in. There was a quick negotiation because this is about spending over the next 2 months. And what happened here just in the last few hours is the I don't know if you call it the socialists or the left-wing bloc, because it's hard to differentiate between the socialists and maybe the hard left, maybe is the best way to put it. The hard left anti-Semite portion of the Democratic Party insisted that this money be pulled out.
Yeah, and they're pandering to that group. A lot of that's the squad. You see those familiar faces.
Yes.
These are the people that they do not like Israel. They're not afraid to say it. Ilhan Omar is probably the leader of that sector of it, of that big push. They want to defund basically Israel. What's the BDS, or what do they call it, Congressman? That movement.
Yes.
Boycott, divest,
Yes.
sanction. Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, but what they want to do is they want to boycott any investment that Israel has in any companies in the United States. It's really targeting U.S. corporations to take all of our monies that we have in our 401k and that sort of thing and pull it out of Israel. I mean, it's really draconian to attack longtime partners like this. And the irony is that the Democratic Party has long been the party of their, the Democrats have always liked to put groups together, right? We don't judge people by the content of their character, but instead they want to judge them by the color of their skin or their ethnicity. So they've long kowtowed to all of these different groups, and Jewish Americans have long been part of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, no, they have.
But clearly they don't need that group anymore because they're clearly fine to just kick them out of their coalition.
Bad politics on their side. That truly is. And another assault on Israel here. Biden wants to, reiterating his eagerness to get back into the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal. Take a listen.
The United States remains committed to preventing Iran from gaining a nuclear weapon. We're working with the P5+1 to engage Iran diplomatically and to seek a return to JCPOA. We're prepared to return to full compliance if Iran does the same.
What did Israel's leaders, what was the look on their face when he said that at the UN this morning?
Well, look, so far what's happened is this has been a total embarrassment for the Biden administration. It hasn't really been talked about, but they have been begging the Iranians to come back in the deal. And God only knows how much money they're promising, because if you go back to the Obama administration, they secretly, I think illegally, shipped billions of dollars to cut this deal with the Iranians. So far, whatever money they've been offering behind closed doors, I have not been briefed. I'm the top Republican on the Intelligence Committee. I have not been briefed, just like I wasn't briefed when Obama did this the first time. Right. So there's a whole bunch of shenanigans going on, but I think what the Iranians are looking at is they're saying, look, we're not really scared of you anymore. You're out of Afghanistan. You're likely not going to do anything. So what do we care? We're just going to keep building our nuclear weapons. And look, at the right time, if we want to take some more money from you suckers in the United States, I know that Biden and the Democrats will give it to them.
Congressman Devin Nunes, sir, thank you so much for taking the time.
Always a pleasure, Rob. Thanks for having me.
All right, Israel gears up for a potential fourth dose of the COVID vaccine, raising questions over the long-term effectiveness of these vaccines, as Dr. Fauci is ready to give your kids one.
Halloween's what, October 31st? Is that
Yep.
when it is? Yeah, I think there's a really good chance it will be before Halloween.
Should parents be concerned about that? We'll discuss coming up next as Fauci smiles on TV. That plus, as the military mandates vaccines, a quarter of our Navy SEALs are reportedly saying no. Former Navy SEAL Rob O'Neill killed bin Laden, and he weighs in on that. Coming up next, could be a threat to our national security. Plus later, Biden's approval in the toilet, and there are indications it may only get worse. New numbers from a key bellwether swing state later in perspective. Tonight, Israel taking what some might see as harsh measures to ensure that citizens get the COVID-19 vaccine and also a booster shot, a move that has been shot down by the FDA for American citizens even after Biden pushed for it. Our Israel correspondent Dan Cohen is on the ground in Tel Aviv with more tonight.
Israel's prime minister drawing heavy criticism for pitting parents against one another. According to Israel's Channel 13, Bennett told his coronavirus cabinet, quote, "I want the parents to compete with each other. Let them fight." And before school started September 1st, the cabinet voted for a plan in red cities where infection rates are high that grades 8 through 12 would only study in person if 70% of the grade level had received at least one vaccination. I arrived quickly. I think everyone should get vaccinated. I think it will help us get over this horrible pandemic, says this vaccine booster recipient. Bennett is quoted as telling the cabinet he wants the parents of those who vaccinated their children to put pressure on parents who did not vaccinate their kids. Many teachers are furious, saying it's not the job of educators to police students' adherence to health regulations.
We've been 18 months, in this ongoing story. So we're pretty used to it right now. This is the new normal.
Israel's finance ministry is also applying pressure for people to get vaccinated through a new bill that strips unemployment benefits from employees fired for refusing to be vaccinated. The language says someone who refuses the vaccine or refuses regular tests to receive a green pass will be deemed to have resigned on their own and won't be eligible for benefits until 90 days after leaving the job. As of Sunday evening, just over 3 million people in Israel, a third of the population, have received 2 shots plus the booster, the requirement for a green pass.
If enough people will get vaccine against the COVID from all the wide range of ages, we will take care of this, we will handle this fourth wave, and we can get the country back to the routine we knew before the Delta wave began.
Based on the number of vaccines administered, around 80% of Israel's population has received at least one shot, as Israel now prepares for a fourth possible dose of the vaccine. Reporting from Tel Aviv for Newsmax, I'm Daniel Cohen.
All right, as Dan mentioned, Israel is recommending a third shot of the Pfizer vaccine, becoming the first country to do so as part of a nationwide booster campaign. According to a recent Bloomberg report, Israel is preparing for a possible fourth COVID vaccine dose as well. So does all this signal a quick loss of effectiveness with these vaccines? Could we see something like this in this country? Admiral Brett Giroir joins us now, former Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services, White House Coronavirus Task Force member. Admiral, thank you so much for coming on. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me on tonight.
So what do you make of this Israel plan? A third, maybe a fourth dose already? Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think Israel on the fourth dose, of course, I'm not in their meetings, but I think they're just planning for every contingency. But let me just say, in America right now, based on the data, for the great majority of people, the 2 doses are still highly protective against hospitalizations and deaths. And you saw that despite Biden getting way ahead of the science, the politics were trying to push the science. The FDA advisory committee said, no, it's not necessary to have a booster unless you're over 65 or in a very special class. I think that is the right decision. We have to have the science lead, not the politics. Biden got it wrong this time, as he had many times before.
Right. I want to talk about something here. There's a guy named Guy Benson, a town hall editor, who tweeted out this recent clip of Fauci, and the claims that he makes here are pretty preposterous, and it's basically a flat-out lie, talking about the danger of COVID to kids. Here's the clip.
Even though relatively speaking, compared to an adult, they do not get as seriously ill. We have lost more children from SARS-CoV-2 than we ever lose for influenza.
Saying that COVID kills more kids than influenza. Well, CDC data says something else entirely. And for the last 8 flu seasons, the estimates show more pediatric deaths from flu than we have seen among kids with COVID throughout the entire year-and-a-half pandemic. So one season of flu versus a couple rounds of COVID has been more deadly. The flu has been more deadly. Why would Fauci lie about something like this?
So I think partially right and partially wrong.
Okay.
We do have an outbreak in children. We are seeing about 1,000 children per week who are hospitalized. But the fact is, if we look at the 5 to 11-year-olds, and again, every child death is a tragedy. I'm a pediatric ICU doctor. We've Now, why doesn't the CDC go back and look at every one of those 5 to 11-year-olds? Were they hit by a truck and got diagnosed with COVID, or did they really die of COVID? Did they have respiratory illnesses like on a ventilator or debilitated? We really need to know those facts. There is no reason why the CDC can't review each one of those 110. There's 21,000 people at the CDC to let us really understand what the risk profile of our children is. Look, I'm a proponent of vaccines, but I'm more of a proponent of giving parents the information they need to make the best decision for their families.
Yeah, there is hesitation. I mean, we are seeing hesitation among parents in putting these needles into their young kids. What will happen with that? How does that all work out? Because I just wonder, are we going to get to the point where governments, local governments, state governments are going to say, okay, your kid's not vaccinated, your kid can't come in the restaurant?
So I think it's a complex issue, and I've thought about it, and I don't know exactly what I would do, but I think probably the data are going to support the authorization of vaccines for children 5 to 11. It's a small number, but it's building on a great foundation. But I do believe if I were the president, I would issue a presidential executive order that you cannot mandate children's vaccinations until they're fully approved. Yeah. I think this really needs to be a choice of the parents, particularly given the relatively low risk of children. So I would probably authorize them, but issue an order that you cannot mandate them to go to school or anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about an age group so young that the risk is so low, and parents, I mean, I know a lot of parents that don't want to give their kids flu shots. They don't want to be putting any unnecessary needles in their kids at a young age. If they do try to mandate that, I can't imagine that's going to go very well. Admiral, thank you so much for taking the time. We appreciate it. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
All right. Coming up, Del Rio, Texas, looking to see you. They say that they've sent a few hundred back, is what we've heard. They claim they're going to send back all the single men, apparently. But do you think that these people, by and large, are actually going to be sent back to Haiti, or will they stay?
Well, I think a very small portion will actually be returned to Haiti. And I think that's evident by just the numbers and the data. So if you're a minor or if you're a family that comes across, whether you're from Haiti or anywhere else in the world, the Biden administration has made a policy decision that you will remain here in the United States. So all of those Haitians that you show under the bridge and Del Rio are not just single adults. They're a lot of families, and they will stay here in the United States. They'll go to cities all across the country. They'll be flown, or they'll take a bus or they'll take a train to cities all across the country. Because of policy decisions that the Biden administration has made. They made them on day one and they stuck to them. And so I think at the end of the day, you'll see actually very little deportations back to Haiti and other parts of the world.
You know, I ask this question all the time when we talk about this subject. What % of Americans, no matter their political affiliation, approve of this border policy, approve of just letting everybody in, no matter how much they need, no matter the burden to society, they will be just approve of an open southern border? What do you think?
Well, I think it's very small, actually. I think the vast majority of Americans probably see what's going on the southern border, see that it is not only humanitarian, but a security and a COVID crisis going on down there. And I think they've lost confidence in the administration. They've lost confidence in DHS to do the right thing, to have a strategy that works. We keep hearing from the DHS secretary that he has a strategy, My question is, when will it work? Because it's been ongoing almost for 8 months now, and nothing is working.
Yeah.
So you need to change your strategy if it's not working. And again, they continue to just keep doing the same old thing with the same results, and you continue to see larger and larger groups crossing that border.
Yeah, they sold the country on this idea that the United States was founded as effectively a refugee camp, somewhere that everybody could just come to and expect to be just taken care of. That's what the United States stands for. They go back to all of the immigrants coming to Ellis Island, to a country that did not have an infrastructure for welfare. They couldn't just provide for people that came here. If you came to the United States, you wanted to come here, sure, come on over, but you don't get anything when you show up. You just come in, and if you can make it, you make it. That's all lost now.
Absolutely, and I think this administration was hell-bent on just reversing anything that the Trump administration did. And so there was no evaluation on the effectiveness of those policies and programs. And so when they canceled them, they went back to an immigration system of the Obama administration. And what they failed to realize is that the cartels and the smugglers and the traffickers have become very smart and adept over the last 4 years in altering their business plan and making sure they're getting people over that border. And they've run up against that firsthand, and they see that they're in a massive crisis, and it is very difficult to dig out in the middle of a crisis.
Yeah, we've effectively put out a message that we as the United States are ready to adopt the world. Anybody that needs it can just come on over. And I agree with you that I think it's vastly over 70%. I think this will hurt them very much in the next election next year. I can't imagine it won't, because people watch this. This is on TV all day long, and it's just unbelievable to see how ridiculous this policy is. It wasn't under you, though, sir. Chad Wolf, former acting U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security. Good to see you again, Chad. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
All right, the military is active duty Navy SEALs. It's actually a lot more than I would have thought, because it's not easy to be a Navy SEAL. Joining me now to talk about this, somebody who certainly knows that, former Navy SEAL Rob O'Neill, the SEAL who killed Osama bin Laden. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you too, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, I mean, how big of a problem could this be? If a quarter of the SEALs don't want to get the shot, what happens?
It's a pretty big problem. You got to figure, if we have 2,500 active duty Navy SEALs split by 2 coasts, and we've got a lot of different areas of operation. Yeah. We're always trying to build them up. We can't make training any easier. And now that they're enforcing all of these, whatever they're doing, they'd rather these SEALs not go to the range. They want to do some kind of a social experimentation. And this vaccine is just one of the, no SEALs died from COVID, and these are some of the healthiest guys in the world. They don't like it, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the point. I mean, we keep talking about it. It's like, it's all about risk. If you're a certain age and you got these pre-existing conditions, yeah, get the shot, go nuts. But if you're one of these, I mean, these guys, don't you have to hold your breath for like 5 minutes or some crazy thing to be a Navy SEAL?
3.5 minutes. It depends which instructor you have. Go out of their way to do everything they can for the country. If they don't want to do this, they shouldn't. 99% of the people survive this. And when we invaded Iraq and we were given all kinds of enough, they're doing it. For some reason, they're just testing. Men, you want to get more. They're just leadership.
They're boxing out the biggest bad to do, and we invest a ton. I mean, some of these guys, they say right. Think that escalates into them just being cut off?
Well, like a week, they're going to kick you out. And I don't know if that's not deployable, but some of the guys they're tired of all this nonsense. They're there to kill bad guys. That's what they want to do, but they're so hamstrung right now. And it's not the individual.